Okay, I'll start with housekeeping, just because I think these are things a lot of people already know, so don't spend too much time on it. You can please mute yourself. That way we can avoid any mistakes like on the last one I did where I muted everyone, including the speaker. That was not good. So if you could help me out and mute yourself, that'd be lovely. If you have questions, make liberal use of the chat. I'm happy to either interject those or reference those at the end of our presentation today. And with that, I'll begin. Formal introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Courtney. Some of you may have seen me this morning on our webinar that we did with Vince Rose on digital marketing. So thanks if you came to both of these events. We want to make a big heartfelt thanks and shout out to Forward Festival and all the organizers there. This is our 4th year of participating in Forward Festival, and it remains one of my favorite events. And even though it's virtual this year, I've been overwhelmed with just how generous the sponsors have been and how great the organizing has been. And it's been really cool to use the app. So I want to make a quick note about that. Some of the folks participating today joined us through, or they registered through Eventbrite, and you may not be using the app. If you are using the app, please be sure at the end of the presentation today to fill out the survey that's provided through the app. And if you're not, I'll send you a survey, and if you can fill that out in either way, it's very helpful for us. We have another presentation that we're going to do on e-commerce next week. So all your comments will really help us make sure we get the most out of that. Again, I'm Erin Courtney, and I'm with Earthling Interactive. We are a website and web application development company. In addition to that, however, we really are business problem solvers. So we start with your business problem, and then we use our toolkit of web tools and products to help solve that business problem. One of the business problems we frequently find ourselves solving is a website and website development. We're platform agnostic at Earthling. However, we do have a WordPress expert in our house, and that's Becky Gibson. Becky has been working at Earthling. We've been
Your
working
audio is
together.
breaking up.
Is everyone experiencing that? No, I think that might be on your end, but thank you for letting me know. Okay, thanks everyone. So I've been working with Becky, had the privilege of working right next to me at my desk for 6 years. She is both a brilliant developer and an amazing project manager. And if you've ever worked in this field, you know that those two skills to have in one person is really valuable. And I think you'll get a lot out of our presentation today. And please make ample use of the questions because Becky is an expert. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Becky on why WordPress works.
Thank you, Erin. Let's hope Google presentation works today too. Hi, I'm Becky Gibson. This photo was taken several months ago. I haven't had a haircut since March. I get to change that next Monday. I'm really excited about it. As Erin said, I work at Earthling Interactive, and I am newly appointed Director of CMS, Content Management Systems. And having been at Earthling for 6 years, I've been a developer, a team lead, project manager, and all sorts of other hats that we all get to wear. And I hadn't touched WordPress when I started at Earthling, and they took me on the team anyway. And since working there, I've taken over or hijacked the Madison WordPress meetup, along with a couple of colleagues, Vince and Dan. And we've been doing that for 3 years. And I'm a tech nerd from way back. Some things that I enjoy away from the computer. I like fooding. I have a food blog, but since that's computer related, I didn't put it on the slide. I do a lot of knitting, mostly in the winter. And Fallout 4 is still my game of choice. Sometimes you just have to shoot some feral ghouls to round out the day. So, oh, nope, there we go. So we wanted to cover a couple of things about what is WordPress, if you don't know. It is a content management system. It's much more than just a blogging platform. It did start out that way, but blogging is very passé now. So we can use it for a lot more different projects. It's open source, which means it's free, and it also means that there's a huge team and multiple teams of people that contribute to the success and future of the code base, constantly evolving, solving new problems, which means in the future your site would be still supported because it's not going anywhere. It's easy to use from an administrative perspective, and it can be customized to fit your needs, the needs of your staff, those folks administering, and most importantly, your customers that are using your website. So we hear a lot about WordPress being a security target. You may even have heard people, if you're running a WordPress site or considering running a WordPress site, people might gasp with fear about how vulnerable it is, or that it's a security risk. And the truth is that all websites on the internet are vulnerable to hacking attempts. So why does WordPress get that reputation? Well, it runs 64% of all sites that use a CMS, and that equals 38% of all websites on the internet. So those odds are pretty good. I don't know if they're Vegas odds, but they're pretty good if your goal is to harvest passwords. So it's a nice big target. So why WordPress fails? You're not at the wrong presentation. I'm going to start with a list of reasons why WordPress is cited as having security issues, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do about each of those. And then I might use some terms that are foreign or nerdy, but please stick around because it's going to be helpful for you to know these terms now and not when you're on the phone with your developer or trying to find someone to help you repair a compromised website. I'd say I'm probably around the 3 to 4 nerd rating scale. So why WordPress fails? Oh, poor dog. Here's the list of our failures or security issues. So insecure hosting, weak passwords, users, unfortunately, and administrative access. I'll tell you why those tie together. Default setup and configuration. When the core is out of date, and when your plugins and themes are either out of date, out of development, or out of service. And I'll get into what that means specifically. But one thing that these all have in common is that they all had a human choice when deciding not to do anything about them. So WordPress works when you work with it. And I'm not going to read this whole slide to you. I'll paraphrase. So security is not about a perfectly secure system, but security is risk reduction. So you want to make choices that have a positive effect on the security of your site with a reasonable level of effort and management. So we'll get into, the decisions that you make, whether or not you can make them, whether or not you can affect the list that we're going to go through. Doing none of our tips here would leave you most vulnerable. So why WordPress works. Welcome. So the first decision is about hosting. So really nobody wants to pay for hosting. There's free, there's shared hosting. There's a hosting provider that rhymes with schmo schmatty. So shared hosting is what most of us think of when we think of hosting a website. You're on a virtual machine, or you're on a machine somewhere, and everybody else is on that same machine. So your site is vulnerable based on that host's security policies on their server, and whether or not someone else on that same server is following protocol. If someone gets into their site, they could make their way through to yours. It's a possibility. It's rare, but it happens. Then there's a virtual private server. So if you think about a VPS, if you think of a partitioned hard drive, you can't go from one to the other without being in charge of all of them. So it's a more secure server because fewer people have access to the larger pie. A dedicated or on-prem or on-premise server means you own the machine, so a tower on your floor or a cooling room, a cooling closet behind the office, where you're in charge, you or employees of your company are in charge of maintaining the operating system and the hardware. And then there's managed, which is similar to dedicated, but someone else is responsible for taking care of the maintenance and management. Someone else whose job it is. So someone who wants to be doing that. So that's why he gets the light bulb, because he's going to have someone else do it. Just a little story about the dedicated or on-prem choice. You do need to know what you're doing. So that's the learning curve there. In 2000-ish, I had the grand idea to host my website on my tower sitting under my desk, because then I wasn't paying anyone. Hosting was a lot more expensive then. It was probably like 15 or 20 bucks a month. And I was in college, wasn't going to do that. So I'd serve up my site and change the IP address every time, because I wasn't paying for a static IP, because that was also expensive. And I came home one day and I didn't have any more hard drive space. And that's because someone had figured out how to use the storage on my machine to host their torrent files. So they were using me as their server so they could get more points in the torrent world. If you were around back then, that was a fun time. So the next choice or choice we have is to enforce a password policy. Unfortunately, the password 123456 still tops the list in 2020 of passwords in use, and it being the worst. You can see that WordPress will generate you a strong password and tell you that it's strong. If you choose to override that, you need to confirm the use of the weak password. Wouldn't recommend even allowing this checkbox to be visible for the users. What we do recommend is picking a plugin that will enforce strong passwords, and you can do it based on role. So admins always have to have a strong password. We'll get into what admins means in a second. Enforce password expiration. Also check against the Have I Been Pwned list. Have I Been Pwned, pwned.com. You can go type in your email address and see how often your credentials have been harvested. But don't do that until around 5, so you can have a drink afterwards. So this error down here is from a plugin that I installed, which will tell you how many times that password has been breached. And it won't let you save your account with that breached password. There's also an extension of password strength enforcement, and that's two-factor authorization, or 2FA, two-factor authentication or authorization. So the 2FA means it's combining something you have, like a credit card or your phone, with something you know, like a PIN or a password. An additional version is something you are, which could be a voice print, biometric fingerprint, or an iris scan. So these two-factor types make it more difficult to pretend to be you. And I know two-factor authentication is pretty inconvenient. So this is a screenshot from my phone of my 2FA app of all the accounts, and you can see there's show more, that I have to 2FA in at least every day, depending on the policy, maybe every time I log in. So that these numbers change every 20 or 30 seconds. And the place I'm logging into is connected to this app and can authorize me based on the number matching up. So it is pretty inconvenient, but it's way less inconvenient than being permanently locked out of your account because of a compromise. So it's like insurance, but it doesn't cost anything, and it is invaluable. And how many things can you say that about? Not an endorsement, but we have used iThemes Security as a plugin, Shield Security, and WordFence Security. They help with the strong password and 2FA setup, and they also offer a lot more in terms of security for the website, which we won't get into here because that could be a whole nother talk. So now we're talking about users and admin access. So an admin is a person or a group of people that have access to the back end of the site. So usually it'll be your developer and maybe the person that's in charge of the content. If you lose control of the admin area, lots of things can go wrong, including not being able to log in yourself. We want to be able to check on our users. I'll skip ahead because I skipped ahead. So one of the ways to secure the admin area is to make sure that you're not using admin as a username. So that's like the equivalent of using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some hosts have like a fancy WordPress installation where they help you get it installed, and mine, for example, has admin as the default username, and that's unfortunate and a little ignorant. So you want to make sure to change that to something either unique to you or unique to your company, something not easy to guess. And then another security through obscurity action would be to create a second admin user, because WordPress always installs as the first user is an admin, and then who knows what the other ones are. So say you've got 7 people on your team and they all have an account. They don't all default to admin, but the first user always does. And then you want to make a point to audit the users that you do have and the roles that they are assigned. So perhaps Sally doesn't do the content anymore. Maybe she's moved into accounting. Then she probably doesn't need to have an admin role, and maybe she uses a pretty bad password. So changing her to a different role that's more appropriate reduces the risk of someone hacking into that account. You also want to check your site users for names that you don't recognize. One possible one type of hack could be that someone is creating admin users in your database without your knowledge. So you want to be able, A, to know who your admins are and are supposed to be, and B, check on those so that they don't surprise you later on. So that's the users. And then this is an example of a query that someone could run on your database to look for that first user, the ID equals 1. So if that's not there, it's likely that that script isn't going to keep digging deeper, because they're just going to go on to another website that maybe didn't take this step, and just a little easier to get into. So I should have put a couple nerds next to that one. So now the default setup and configuration is, this is a better example of security through obscurity, because we're modifying stuff, we're modifying files that, you know, are standard, and that's how the installation works. But to make these changes just makes it a little more difficult to hack into. So one thing you can do is change the database table prefix. So that defaults on installation to WP underscore. I've seen some server or some hosts do, you know, a long string of 7 to 10 characters, or you could just say WP my company underscore. Just anything that it changes it from the default. And then another way to obscure is to hide or change mod the WP config file. And so that's the configuration file that contains your database name, password, and the prefix that we changed up here in the first bullet. So you can imagine if someone gets a hold of that file, you've just invited them into your site. So change mod means to change the permissions of the file to make it less open. So 440 means that the server and the server user can read and write, or read the file. Nobody else can have access to it. So this is one way to harden that point of entry. Another step you can take is to add a line in the WP config to disable file editing from the dashboard. So what that means is, right now, when you install WordPress, a user with the correct level, so we'll just say an administrator user, can go in and through the navigation, get to the PHP files that are running your site. So that's dangerous because users shouldn't be modifying code from the admin area on the server. And folks should not be able to get access to do that. So, and by folks, I mean people that are in your site hacking into other users and getting into the dashboard. So this is the line that you or your double nerd would add to the config file. Serve your site over HTTPS, so that's the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. The whole internet should be on HTTPS, but it's not yet. But you and your developer or yourself can work pretty quickly. We use Cloudflare. They're free. The free level of their account provides you with a server level, browser level security certificate. So at least you're on HTTPS, which means Google likes your site better and the results will come up higher. So that's one nerd. And then if you have the ability, if your host allows it, the workflow, not allows the code repository, but if you can get the code repo into your workflow, that's just a good way to keep a record of code changes. So if someone were to inject malicious PHP into your site, you'd at least have a code backup of all of those files, so you could find the differences between them to see where all the insecurities happened, or you could quickly push up your code to get rid of the problem and then try to figure out what caused it. We use GitLab and GitHub mostly, and some of our sites use Bitbucket. So those are 3 different repo companies, and most of them are free or pretty inexpensive, depending on how many projects you have. So now we want to talk about keeping the core updated. So unfortunately, at least 20% as of what's today, Friday? So as of Wednesday, 20% of WordPress sites are running WordPress 4 or below, which is, and that's a pretty big percentage since I think 5 has been out for almost a year and a half now. So those folks are risking, something even more than just someone who just installed their site. But since WordPress 3.7, automatic background updates are available for minor versions. And in WordPress, the minor version is the third dot. So for example, right now, 5.5 is a major version that just came out yesterday. So a minor version would be 5.5.1. And if you've got automatic background updates turned on, that would be automatically applied, which helps save time depending on how many of these sites you're maintaining. WordPress also releases code updates back to this 3.7. If you are insisting on running a site that old, since 3.7 was released in October of 2013, it's probably time to check with someone about updating that, either for you or with you. So if you want to control your updates, which Earthling does, because we want to do a lot of visual regression or visual testing and code testing. So we run the updates manually and test. We do this on a local instance, so that that involves a code repo, or I think like Local by Flywheel is an app, at least for the Mac, that you can download to run a site locally. So you can test your updates before pushing them live. Staging is also a great option if your host provides that feature. SiteGround does for pretty cheap, one of their less expensive hosting options. So if you can find a host that has a staging, at least you can run your updates through the dashboard there and then test it before you push to production. So don't be this guy who doesn't always test his code, but when he does it on production. So now we need to know our plugins and themes, and this gets a little more complicated because, yeah.
We had a question about plugins. Oh. Can I interrupt just real quick so that you can keep that in mind? Mm-hmm. There might be other people that have this question. It was about how many plugins are too many on a shared hosting site? You look like you're familiar with this question. You can answer it either now or when it makes sense, but I want you to know that somebody's interested.
Yeah. I'll do a short answer now, a TLDR, and then we can get into that at the end if you'd like. Technically, any amount of plugins is fine. Actually, the problem comes when trying to figure out which one or three of them are causing you trouble. So the more you have, clearly, the more work that's going to be. I have worked with sites that have 40 to 100 plugins, and they run fine. And then there was a site I was troubleshooting that had at least 30 plugins just to extend WooCommerce, and it was not running fine, and we couldn't figure out which one was the problem because there was too many. So I hope that answers you enough for right now.
Thank you.
And to make sure that everyone knows that plugins and themes are packages of code that extend the functionality of the core WordPress site. So they are add-ons. It's kind of like an app for your phone, but it's more functional in that, I want my thing to do X, WordPress plugin that does X, and then you'll find probably more than one solution for that. So that's what plugins are. And themes, same notion. It's instead of being functionality, it's more look and feel. Sometimes they're tied together. So most of the security breaches in WordPress actually come from outdated plugins, because there's a lot more of them than there are of just WordPress, and the math to get all of them is exponential. So you want to make sure to keep them updated. Your dashboard will tell you when a plugin needs to be updated. You might get an email from the developer if you're on their mailing list. You may get, like I do twice a month, I get an email from our security plugin that tells me a list of all the ones that have breaches this month. So it's that frequent that things are updated for security. You want to check on the status, and here's why I say that is because some plugins that are in the WordPress plugin repository, which I'll touch on in a second, they're in there and they're fine, but they might not have been systematically tested with your version of WordPress or the version of PHP that your host is running on, but you're not going to get an indication of that in your dashboard. So you want to make sure you're just glancing at the WordPress repository, if that's where you got the plugin, frequently enough to make you feel good. But another flip side to this is that not all plugins need to be updated just because they're old. So one example of that is that we've got a plugin on a couple of sites that all it is some custom fields where you type in your Apple app ID and load up an icon that'll appear when you're on your phone. So that functionality is not going to change unless browser functionality fundamentally changes. So the plugin doesn't need to be, new releases don't need to happen because it's just adding a function for the browser, not for WordPress. So knowing the status, checking and knowing the status is recommended. And then get your plugins from trusted sources. So we try to stick with the WordPress repository, and that's because when you submit a plugin to WordPress, it goes through a rigorous testing system by the folks at Automatic, the company that owns WordPress, and they send it back to you if something's wrong, and there's a rigorous back and forth process. So that is a trusted source. Other trusted sources are theme developers that everybody uses Elementor, or everybody's using Divi. So they would be in a world of hurt if something, if they became untrustworthy. It would suck for a lot of sites, but that's why they don't do that. So another type of untrusted source is, and I just learned about this creating this deck. Apparently, some developers take a paid plugin and release it for free on their site. And you might want to download that just to see if, do I really want to pay $99? Someone's having fun with the pen. So if you install that on your site, you're basically inviting malware onto your website because you don't know what's in the code. It might be free because the secondary developer decided that they were going to write a script to pull passwords out of your database, and getting access to the password that you use on your WordPress site, which is the same as your Gmail password, which gets you into your bank account, is worth a lot more than the $99 that you didn't spend on that plugin. So don't do that. Another trusted source story is from ThemeForest. If you've ever shopped for plugins, we had a situation where we bought a plugin from ThemeForest, which is, and for all intents and purposes, a pretty trustworthy source. And they don't vet their developers the way WordPress does. So we bought a plugin. It didn't work. We asked for a refund. The developer said, sure, I'll refund you. So you'll get all your money back, and then ThemeForest won't take my money. And then you can pay me the $200 or whatever it was, and I'll fix the plugin and send you new code. And we were like, no, not going to happen. So that's an example of a trusted source that became quickly untrustworthy. I don't know that I think we ended up writing our own plugin, and I think we'll just do that from here on out. I'm not sure how to get rid of these lines. So something people might think or say to themselves is that I'm just a small business with a website. I'm not a target for hackers. And it's not going to be, it's going to feel, but it will not be personal when it happens. And I say when it happens because that's probably more likely than if. The programs that are written to find these exploits are not discriminating. They don't care if you're selling soap at the farmer's market or if you're selling $1 million WooCommerce products per year. All they want to do is find a hole, and they'll keep coming back to try to find that hole. So it doesn't matter how big or small you are. But they know that website owners of any size just don't have the time or knowledge to deal with it. So this all sounds like a lot, but you don't have to do it alone. It's up to you and the partners that you work with to reduce or eliminate these breaches, plan a recovery from an attack when it happens, and monitor to prevent future issues. It's the end. Any questions?
This is a great opportunity, people. You can tell Becky knows her WordPress. We'd love to answer your questions. You can use the chat to ask a question.
You can draw your question on the screen.
Why is that? Is that a thing? Can I do that? I'm trying to.
There's an annotate option, but I don't know who's doing that.
Oh,
so
interesting. No one? No questions? Well, Becky, any bonus tips you want to give people before? Oh, wait.
There we go.
Here we go. There is a question. Ready?
Yeah.
You mentioned that Divi is a pretty trustworthy site. Any other comments on that?
I don't have statistics right in front of me about how many sites you use the Divi theme, or Elegant Themes is the parent company for Divi. My experience is only that we've used it a lot on our sites. They keep up with trends. They release security updates. I don't want to say frequently because that makes it sound like they're not secure, but quickly. And we continue to use their services for both theme and page builder. So
okay.
Does that help?
I've got a few more questions, so let's keep that in mind as we're answering. They're starting to roll in. Becky, what are some of your favorite themes?
So we tend to answer that question based on the project, because it really depends on, here's a good answer. Depends on how flexible it is and what the outcome needs to be. So let's say you've got someone that really wants to dive in and can use any page builder. We might use Divi because that person could, they're a self-starter, they want to learn. They could use that base theme to create whatever they want, and that's something that's fun for them. If we're working with a client who wants to be put in their box, and there's one way to do a layout, and that's the only way for this page type, then we would build a custom theme using advanced custom fields or Gutenberg blocks for sort of a vanilla theme. I think Hello is one by the folks that do the Elementor, which is a page builder, but Hello is a theme. We've used Sage in the past. I can't think of any other empty themes that we've done more recently. So anyone that I say would be a little bit out of date. So
Okay. Great, thank you. I also just want to insert very quickly that we're happy to keep answering these questions. So after we close, send us emails. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you solve problems and use our expertise to get you where you want to go. So let's see. Oh my goodness, there's more questions here. I have a WP Forms plugin that always gets spam messages. How can I prevent that?
Spam, yes, forms and spam are frustrating. Oh shoot, I wish I knew where that email was. We do have to solve this for plenty of clients. I would always start with some type of CAPTCHA, and I know it's not friendly, it's not human friendly, but unfortunately we're trying to, humans have to put up with the things that we've done to make it harder for computers to do what they want to do. So I would start with a reCAPTCHA. There's also you could do a hidden field that if it's filled out, don't submit the form, because a bot isn't looking at your page, they're looking at the code. So if they see a field, they're going to fill it out. If the human can't see the field, then you know that it was a bot and you say, nope. There's a couple other server-side ways you can check for an email or make sure that the email is valid. That would be kind of difficult to validate specific email addresses since there's so many domains now. But yeah, I would start with whatever CAPTCHA the WP Forms plugin provides or suggests.
Great. This might, if this gets too close to the one you already answered, let me know, but you know more than I do. So what themes have you found that are most configurable?
So it does kind of go back to the which theme would you use? Like, we had lots of success with the Hello theme and the Astra theme and Elementor page builder. Both of those items are by the same company that I can't think of the name of it right now. It might just be Elementor. So they're built to work together, and I found Elementor to be highly customizable for the experience of the admin. It wasn't so great for the experience of our development, but that part is, we overcame those obstacles and still were able to deliver a project for the administrator. So really depends on the project. I know that's not a good answer, but that's what I got right now.
Well, it's always helpful to have some, what are the factors that you consider when you're doing the depend stance? All right, next. What would be a good plan for recovery from an attack?
So because there are so many different types of attacks, that plan could change quickly depending on what was going on. If it's a host situation, I would call them up. That's just me. If it's a user, if a user account is compromised, I would go straight to a database backup, do some lockouts. Might have to take the site down for a little bit just to prevent any further damage while we figure out where the hole is. And if you've got backups or a code repository, checking, like I said, it's called diffing, checking between the two to see where things have changed. But it's really needle haystack kind of stuff. We had a hacked site a while ago, and I spent probably a week trying to figure out what was causing it. and how we could fix it. We ended up just rebuilding the site in Divi.
That happened. Lots of questions, so I'm going to keep going. If your site is fairly old, do the risks of not updating outweigh the concerns of breaking everything?
That's a good question. So, which one's worse? Well, here's the thing. If your site gets compromised because of ancient plugins and core, you're probably, I mean, it's broken anyway. So why don't you update? I guess it'd have to be, you know, your level of comfort and how important the site is to you in its current functioning state. And, you know, maybe a plugin you're using is not supported anymore, but there's probably another one that does exactly or very close to what that one does that is newer and supported.
Okay. Is WordPress the best way to go if you want to freelance and build websites for people and you have introductory coding skills? And what are the pros and cons of WordPress for that freelancing purpose?
I mean, it's pretty easy. The barrier to entry is low. You might not even need to know a lot. I mean, you should understand PHP as a language, but you don't necessarily need to write it to produce a WordPress website for a client, because these page builders can do a lot of the work for you and for the administrator. That was a long question, and I might have forgotten most of it. Did I get it?
I think the gist of it is you know, I'm thinking about, I would like to do some freelance developing for folks. Is WordPress a good choice, or would you recommend something else for that level of entry into the market?
So I think the answer is yes. WordPress is a good choice because it's open source, and because the resources to help you learn more and continue to apprentice in your own world, and the support is everywhere. So you're not like trying to find someone in Poland to help you with this rando content management system that no one uses. You've got, you know, the whole WordPress world is at your fingertips, because we all want to help each other and share ideas and stuff.
I think that's a really good answer. I hope that let's see. I hope Marissa found that helpful too. Question from Cassie. How do you know when it's time to go live when creating a new website, when so many elements are updated or upgraded so often? This is very true. WordPress is now 5.5, plugins updated, themes updated, etc.
So
great question.
Yeah. We constantly update as we're developing, because who knows what breaking changes. And to be honest, in the 6 years I've been working with WordPress, I don't think I've ever had a WordPress update break anything. Did I just say that out loud? Now I've just jinxed.
I know. I feel a little like
your
shoulder.
I need some sage. So we keep everything updated and then do one last run through before we send the site live. And a note on, I totally skipped over that, and I'm glad this came up then. Keeping things updated, you know, that goes back to the slide about the relative management and how much effort you want to put. So we manage 30 plus WordPress sites. We can't afford the time to go update every single plugin for every single release. For example, Yoast SEO has a weekly release, and it's not always important for our purposes. Maybe it's like fixed a semicolon for PHP 5. We're not running PHP 5, so it doesn't apply to us. So reading the release notes for the plugins, getting an idea of, what that developer's system of security versus not. If it's not a security update, it's not an urgency. Like WordPress 5.5 did not have any security fixes. It had improvements in their site security as far as the admin's concerned, but we're not going to rush out and update all those sites yesterday, because there's probably going to be a security release next week, because that's how WordPress goes.
Prioritizing security.
Yeah. Over just random.
Yeah, which is good that people are paying attention and keep fixing little things, but you just have to keep prioritize. Oh, okay, great. We have, well, this is sort of a question. It's more of a request. Can you do a Divi Q&A someday? And I'm going to jump in and answer that because I get to decide on these things. Yeah, do a Divi webinar. Let's do it, Lindsay. We can certainly do that, and we'll invite folks, and you can come and we'll talk about Divi. Does that sound good? You approve, Becky?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'm somewhat new to WordPress. Is the idea essentially that you can get pre-made site templates off the shelf, or that you can customize them to any specific need if you know how to code?
Yes. So there are a lot of what we call templated sites, or pre-designed options. So we'll go back to Divi, for example, but Elementor has the same thing where you've paid for this plugin. I'm not going to quote the numbers because they'll probably change by tomorrow. But they offer a template. So you go in and say dog walker, and it comes up with a design that you can choose from with stock free photography, illustrations, the forms all set up, the page is all laid out, and you could go live in 15 minutes. An hour. That's not necessarily the best if there's 80 dog walkers in your neighborhood and they all have the same website. So in that case, you would want to customize it, probably maybe, have a nice logo and a color scheme for your brand. And you might want to, maybe you don't want 16 sections that scroll all the way down the page. Maybe you just want to show a picture of you and your dog and the 6 dogs you walk. So yes, you can do both, and it depends on your market, your budget, your decision about how different you want to look from other folks that are doing what you're doing, or differentiating yourself. Was that good?
I thought that was a great answer. I hope Marissa got something useful there. And I can tell you, I'll just speak from my own experience, not being a developer, but early on at Earthling, having been the low level person that was doing some of those, like just grab a template and a theme and on a theme and spin it out. And that's a great way to get started, because then you kind of learn the infrastructure, you actually provide the service, and then slowly but surely your abilities grow along with how many modifications that you make. I feel like the drop off really happens when you need to move outside of what kinds of customizations are easily available within that template itself. So that's when a more advanced developer is going to be needed. But up to a certain point, you can do some pretty nice customizations without having advanced development skills. Well, goodness gracious, that was our last question. I want to point out to everybody, though, that I did put Becky's email in the chat down there. She's the last one in the chat.
Gibson, like the guitar. Gibson. At Earthling Interactive, that just rolls right off the tongue.com.
Yeah. And again, happy to answer questions. stay tuned. We've recently brought webinars into our repertoire, and we just love doing this. So
And if
we
you
hope
have
to,
more ideas too, right? If
yeah,
there's more questions or
exactly.
ideas,
Yep.
we'll talk about it.
Yep. Yeah, we need to know what you want to hear. That's the best way for us to get good content to you. So super duper. Enjoy your Forward Festival if you're Forward Festivaling. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend. And please fill out that survey. Thanks, Blaze. And have a great weekend. And bye, Becky.
Thank
It
you,
was so good
everyone.
to see you. Bye, everybody.